If you've ever watched a high-level fighting game match and wondered why one player is throwing fireballs from across the screen while another is sprinting in to grab them for 50% of their health, you've already witnessed the invisible rock, paper, scissors that defines the entire genre. Every fighter on every roster belongs to an archetype, a category of playstyle with its own philosophy, its own win condition, and its own psychological game plan for breaking you down. Understanding these archetypes is the difference between mashing buttons and actually seeing the match happen. So today we're breaking down the 9 most iconic fighting game archetypes, moving from the ones every beginner learns first all the way up to the brain, melting, high execution styles that take years to master. Starting with the archetype that is quite literally the first thing anyone ever learns, Shoto. The Shoto is the foundation of the entire fighting game genre, the archetype every single player is measured against, and the blueprint from which almost everything else deviates. The term comes from Shotokan, originally referencing the karate style, but in fighting game language, it's come to mean the well-rounded, do-everything fighter built around a specific holy trinity of tools. A fireball to control space from afar, an anti-air uppercut to swat opponents out of the sky, and a forward-moving special to close distance or punish mistakes. The narrative core of the Shoto is balance itself. This character has an answer for every situation, but a dominant answer for none, which means the Shoto player wins not by exploiting a single overwhelming strength, but by simply being more fundamentally sound than their opponent. The win condition is mastery of the basics, spacing, timing, reading your opponent, rather than any one gimmick. The key players here are the literal faces of the genre. Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter are the original Shotos, the characters whose fireball and uppercut kit became so influential that the entire archetype is named after them. You'll find their design DNA echoed everywhere. Terry Bogard in Fatal Fury and King of Fighters, Kyo and Iori, Saul Bad Guy in Guilty Gear, and countless others all carry that same core toolkit. In terms of the competitive ecosystem, the Shoto is the balancing rod for the whole cast. Because they have no glaring weaknesses, they set the baseline that every other archetype is designed against. A specialist character only justifies their extreme strengths by also having the kind of glaring weakness a Shoto never does. This is why new players are almost universally pointed toward a Shoto first. Learning one teaches you the actual grammar of fighting games, the fundamentals that every other archetype is just a specialized dialect of. Grappler. If the Shoto is about balance, the Grappler is about terror. This is the archetype built around a single, overwhelming, match-defining threat, the command grab. The narrative core of the Grappler is the psychological pressure of proximity. These are typically large, heavy, slow-moving characters who hit like a freight train and possess special move throws that deal enormous damage and cannot be blocked. That last part is the entire point. In most situations, a defending player feels safe holding back to block, but a grappler renders blocking useless the moment they get close, because a command grab beats a block clean. The grappler's win condition is to get in and touch you exactly once, converting that single grab into a devastating chunk of your health bar, and a terrifying reset into more of the same. The definitive key player is Zangief from Street Fighter, the red-trunked Russian wrestler whose spinning piledriver is the most famous command grab in the genre, and whose entire game plan is the slow, menacing walk toward a paralyzed opponent. Other iconic grapplers include Potemkin in Guilty Gear, Tager in BlazBlue, Clark and Ralph in King of Fighters, and King in Tekken. The lore connectivity of the grappler is where fighting game psychology gets genuinely beautiful, because the grappler barely needs to grab you to win. They need you to be afraid of being grabbed. Once that fear sets in, the opponent starts jumping away, mashing buttons in panic, and making desperate mistakes, all of which the grappler is built to punish even harder than the grab itself. This creates the archetype's signature tension. The grappler is often slow and struggles to approach against zoning, so their weakness is getting in, but the instant they succeed, the entire psychological dynamic of the match flips in their favor. They force the opponent to abandon patient, correct defense, and start gambling. Rushdown. Rushdown is the archetype of relentless forward pressure, the in-your-face aggressor whose entire philosophy is to never let you breathe. Where the grappler lumbers toward you, the rushdown character explodes toward you, and then simply refuses to leave. The narrative core is momentum and suffocation. These characters are typically fast, mobile, and armed with quick plus-on-block attacks and strong mix-up potential, meaning once they're close, they can chain pressure together in a way way that constantly threatens you from multiple angles: high, low, left, right, throw, and forces you to guess correct over and over just to survive. The win condition is to seize the initiative early, take their turn, and then never give it back, running the opponent's clock and patience down until they crack. Key players who embody this include characters like Cammy and Fang-adjacent pressure specialists in Street Fighter, Chip Zanoff in Guilty Gear, Blisteringly Fast, Glass Cannon Fragile, Yun and Yang, Wolverine in Marvel vs. Capcom, and much of the speed-focused cast in anime fighters. The defining trade-off of Rushdown is the glass cannon dynamic. These characters often have low health and take huge damage when they get hit, because their overwhelming offensive tools have to be balanced by fragility. In the competitive ecosystem, Rushdown is the natural predator of slow and defensive archetypes. It's a nightmare for a grappler trying to set up, or a zoner trying to keep their distance, because the Rushdown player collapses the space those archetypes depend on. But against a strong defensive player who blocks correctly and punishes the Rushdown's overextensions, that same aggression becomes a liability, because a Rushdown character out of momentum, sitting at full screen, is often just a fragile character with no health to spare. Rushdown shapes match pacing more than almost any other archetype. It sets the tempo, and everyone else has to react to it. Zoner. The Zoner is the philosophical opposite of Rushdown, the archetype that treats the space between the two fighters as a weapon in itself. Rushdown wants to be in your face, the Zoner wants you to never ever reach them. The narrative core of the Zoner is control through denial. These characters are equipped with long-range normals, projectiles, and tools designed to fill the screen with threats, methodically chipping away at the opponent's health and patience from a safe distance. The Zoner's win condition is to establish a wall the opponent cannot cross, forcing them to eat damage while trying to approach, and to build a life lead they can then protect by simply keeping the opponent out for the rest of the round. It's a game of frustration and inevitability, death by 1,000 cuts. The definitive key player is Guile from Street Fighter, with his sonic boom projectile and flash kick anti-air forming a defensive fortress that punishes every mistake an approaching opponent makes. Other iconic zoners include Dalsim with his absurd stretchy limbs and teleports, Peacock and Skullgirls, Axel Lowe in Guilty Gear with the longest reach in the game, and characters like Jack and the various keep-out specialists across Tekken. The lore connectivity here is that the zoner defines the match by forcing the opponent to solve a problem. How do I get in? This inverts the usual flow of a fight, making the approaching player do all the risky work while the zoner reacts safely. The zoner's natural weakness is exactly what the Rushdown exploits. Once the wall is breached and the opponent gets in close, many zoners have weak close-range tools and struggle to reset the space. This is the fundamental rock-paper-scissors of the genre in action. The zoner beats the patient, methodical grappler by keeping them out forever, but loses to the explosive Rushdown who blitzes through the projectiles. The zoner rewards patience, game knowledge, and precise spacing above almost any other archetype. Puppet Master. Now we climb into the genuinely complex tier, and the Puppet Master is where fighting games start asking you to do two things at once. This archetype is defined by controlling two characters simultaneously, the main fighter and a separate, independently controlled entity, whether that's a summoned creature, a doll, a stand, or a second body. The narrative core of the Puppet Master is overwhelming the opponent through pincer pressure, attacking from two positions at the same time to create mix-ups and traps that a single character simply cannot produce. The win condition is to set up situations where the puppet attacks from one side while the main character attacks from the other, leaving the opponent mathematically unable to block both. When it works, it looks less like a fight and more like the puppet player is solving a puzzle the opponent is trapped inside. Key players include Zato's One in Guilty Gear and his shadow companion Eddie Carl Clover in BlazBlue, controlling his marionette sister Nirvana, and Ms. Fortune-style detachable characters in Skullgirls. The defining challenge, and the reason this archetype sits so much higher on the complexity ladder, is the sheer execution and mental load required. The player must micromanage two characters at once, inputting commands for the puppet while simultaneously moving and defending with the main body, often using complex negative edge and buffering techniques to keep both active. Drop your concentration for a moment, and the puppet vanishes or desyncs, stripping away half your offense. In the competitive ecosystem, a mastered puppet master is one of the scariest things in any game, capable of unblockable setups and inescapable unstoppable pressure. But the archetype has a steep cliff of a learning curve and is often extremely fragile, punishing the pilot brutally for the smallest mental slip. It's high risk, high reward, and pure spectacle at the top level. Pixie. The Pixie archetype, sometimes called the Rekka or technical rushdown type, is the small, fast, tricky character built around speed, mobility, and a dizzying volume of options. Where a pure rushdown overwhelms with raw pressure, the Pixie overwhelms with complexity and evasion. These are typically tiny characters with excellent movement, rapid strings of attacks, and a deep toolbox of feints, cancels, and mix-ups. The narrative core of the Pixie is death by 1,000 options. The opponent isn't just defending against pressure, they're drowning in the sheer number of things the Pixie could do at any given moment, unable to settle into a reliable defensive pattern because the Pixie keeps rewriting the question. The win condition is to use superior speed and an overwhelming decision tree to confuse the opponent into blocking wrong, then convert those small openings into extended combos. Key players who fit this mold include characters like Yoshimitsu and the more technical mobile cast members in Tekken, Milia Rage and Guilty Gear with her lightning speed and layered mix-ups, and various small, fast anime fighter characters built around movement and options. The distinguishing trait separating the Pixie from a standard rushdown is emphasis on technical execution and option density over pure aggression. A Pixie's strength is the mind game created by having so many tools, not simply running you over. The trade-off, once again, is fragility and a high skill floor. These characters usually have low health and demand precise execution to get the most out of their kit, so a Pixie in unskilled hands is just a weak, flimsy character, while a Pixie in expert hands is a blur of movement that the opponent can never quite pin down. In the ecosystem, the Pixie shapes matches into a frantic, high-speed guessing game, punishing slow or predictable opponents savagely while risking everything on their own razor-thin margin for error. Stance Changer. The Stance Changer is the archetype defined by versatility as its core mechanic, a character who can switch between two or more distinct modes, each with its own moveset, properties, and strategic purpose. The narrative core of the Stance Changer is unpredictability through transformation. By fluidly shifting between stances, the character can change their range, their speed, their mix-up options, and even their entire game plan mid-combo or mid-block string, forcing the opponent to recognize which mode is active and respond to a completely different set of threats on the fly. The win condition is to exploit the opponent's hesitation in that split second of recognition, to use the stance system to create ambiguity, so the defender is always a half step behind. Key players include characters like Jen in Street Fighter, who literally toggles between two entire martial art styles with different move properties, Vega-adjacent claw and mask switchers, much of the deep Tekken cast where characters like Nina, Lei Wulong, and others flow between multiple stances, and Hakumen or stance-heavy anime characters. The lore connectivity of the Stance Changer is that they turn adaptation into a weapon. Where most archetypes ask the opponent to solve one problem, the Stance Changer keeps changing the problem itself. The cost is complexity and memory load. The player must master multiple movesets and, crucially, know the exact right moment to switch, since transitioning between stances often carries risk and vulnerability. Switch at the wrong moment and you eat a punish during the transition. Switch at the right moment and you've bypassed the opponent's defense entirely. This archetype rewards deep game knowledge and adaptability, sitting high on the complexity ladder precisely because you're essentially learning several characters fused into one. Charge Character. The Charge character is a fascinating archetype because its defining trait isn't a philosophy of aggression or defense. It's a specific, self-imposed mechanical constraint that reshapes how the character must be played. Charge characters access their special moves not through motion inputs, but by holding a direction, like back or down, for a short period to charge it, then pressing the opposite direction plus a button to release. The narrative core of the Charge character is disciplined, deliberate positioning. Because you must hold a defensive direction to build your charge, these characters are naturally encouraged toward a patient, grounded, defensive style. You're literally holding back to block while simultaneously storing the energy for your offense. The win condition emerges directly from this. Charge characters tend to be defensive powerhouses who punish opponents for approaching, rewarding the player who maintains discipline and correct positioning. The definitive key player here is, once again, Guile. Many archetypes overlap, and Guile is both a zoner and the poster child for charge mechanics, holding back for his sonic boom and down for his flash kick. Other iconic charge characters include Bison, Balrog, and Blanka in Street Fighter, and a long lineage of grounded, defensive designs across the genre. The lore connectivity is subtle but profound. The charge input mechanic imposes a rhythm on the player, a constant tension between holding your charge and using it, and it shapes match pacing toward the methodical and positional. A charge character can't just throw out specials on a whim the way a Shoto can whiff a fireball anytime. They must plan, holding their charge in anticipation, which makes them reactive and grounded by design. Skilled charge players master hidden techniques to maintain charge while appearing to move freely. But the archetype fundamentally rewards patience and punishes the impatient, both in the player piloting it and the opponent trying to rush it down. Set play specialist. At the very top of the complexity ladder sits the set play specialist, the archetype that turns a single successful hit into a scripted, inescapable nightmare that can last the entire round. The narrative core of the set play specialist is the snowball. These characters are built around Oki, or Okizimi, the art of controlling an opponent as they wake up from a knockdown. The set play specialist's whole game is to score one knockdown, then use precisely timed traps, projectiles, summons, or meaty attacks to create an unblockable or unreactable mix-up on the opponent's wake-up, score another knockdown from that, and repeat the loop until the round is over. The win condition is brutal in its elegance. Get in once, and theoretically, never let the opponent play the game again. Every knockdown feeds the next setup in a chain the defender can't break without a correct, high-pressure guess. Key players include characters like Ibuki in Street Fighter, famous for her devastating vortex of kunai-based wake-up mix-ups, various trap and summon characters across the genre, and setup-heavy anime fighters like the more technical Guilty Gear and BlazBlue Cast. What places the set play specialist at the pinnacle of execution is the extraordinary precision and memorization required. Set play demands frame-perfect timing, deep knowledge of exact setups for every situation and every character weight, and the discipline to execute a memorized script flawlessly under pressure. A dropped input or a slightly mistimed setup and the entire vortex collapses, handing the turn back to the opponent. In the competitive ecosystem, a set play specialist in expert hands represents the terrifying ceiling of what a single opening can become, capable of ending rounds from one hit, but the archetype demands the most homework of any style in the genre, requiring the player to essentially study and rehearse their offense like a pianist practicing scales. It is the ultimate expression of the fighting game truth that in the right hands, one mistake is all it takes. And that's the full spectrum of fighting game archetypes, from the universally accessible to the fiendishly complex. What makes the genre so endlessly deep is exactly this ecosystem. The Shoto sets the standard, the grappler punishes the impatient, the rushdown suffocates the slow, the zoner walls out the aggressive, and the high execution styles like the Puppet Master and Set Play Specialist reward thousands of hours of dedication with godlike control over the match. Every archetype exists in balance with the others, each one strong against some and weak against others, forming that beautiful, endless rock, paper, scissors that has kept players hooked for decades. The next time you watch a match, look past the flashy combos and see the archetypes at war, because that's the real game being played. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.